Fandoms, and welcome to episode 2 of Oomf Said, your twice monthly podcast about anything and everything fandom. Please don't sue us. This week, Oomf said something was bottom energy, but didn't know that top and bottom are sex positions.
I feel like this is a very, what a pure little cinnamon roll moment.
I think bless this person.
Yeah, bless the little cotton socks.
This week we will be talking about a topic that is something I have actually wanted to talk about for a while, which is dead fandoms, dying fandoms, or fandoms that are on their way out. Before we do start, I do want to reiterate to anybody who didn't listen to episode 1, we do have a Twitter page where you can follow and interact with us. It is at Oomf Said, OOMF SAID, spelt it just in case you wanted to know. And if you weren't here last week, we will be reintroducing ourselves for your listening pleasure. I am Mimi. You can find me on our Twitter page under the unicorn emoji.
My name's Jess, and you can find me as the fox emoji.
My name's B, and you can find me rather appropriately under the B emoji.
I'm Jen, and you can find me under the cat emoji.
Jen's our little meow meow.
Jen is our precious little meow meow.
I don't know about precious, but yeah.
Yes, you are, Jen. Yes, you are.
You absolutely are.
Would it be a good icebreaker if we all talked about what we've been up to in fandom this week?
Okay, sure, that's fine. Jen, you want to go?
In certain circles, I probably am going to get in trouble for admitting this, but my fandom experience this week has been revisiting the first Super M album, Super 1.
A
banger of an album.
Like, I can't deny it, okay?
I'm going to make an admission here and say I've never heard it.
Oh, that must
Never
change. You need to change.
Do I just need to change who I am, Jess?
To accept Super M, you do.
Listen, don't judge Super M on dropping alone, okay? Because Super 1 is genuinely a good album. It's got some bangers on it.
I'm sorry, it's just because my introduction to Super M was jopping, so I think it's just tainted everything else afterwards, and I wasn't really interested in getting to know them. Sorry.
Insert it's just, Mark Lee penguin gif.
Again, I don't want to offend anybody. It's just that jopping is not my kind of music. That's
Get in, losers. We're going jopping.
Jopping's not a song, it's a lifestyle.
I love how one time someone friended me or added me on WhatsApp, and my WhatsApp tagline is live, laugh, jop for reasons that I shall not explain. And this person had never heard of K-pop at all. And the first thing that she DM'd me on WhatsApp was, sorry to ask, but are you religious? And I was like, why do you ask that? And she was like, oh, because your WhatsApp tagline says live, laugh, jop, and it says Mark 2. And I was like, oh, you thought that was a Bible quote. I am so sorry.
Anyway, okay. I think after Jen, we had B.
Yeah, me. So what have I been doing? I have had COVID, and so I have been comforting myself with a lot of shiny content recently. So another one for the K-pop. Recently, Universal Music Japan have been broadcasting shinies, really old Japanese concerts from like 2010 to 2015, and those are always fun. There's a lot of like K-pop boys swinging about on wires with lasers shooting out their hands, that kind of thing. It's good. It's good.
Like Iron Man.
It's very, yeah. There's a lot of Iron Man vibes going on there.
Also, extremely early noughties K-pop hair, which is just magnificent in its own right.
The amount of hairspray required for Jonghyun alone, surely just...
The hair wasn't like styled, it was sculpted.
Yep.
It was like, I imagine if you like knocked on the hair, it would make a kind of a tapping noise. But yeah, on that note, Jess, what have you been up to in fandom this week?
Well, same with the whole K-pop trend. This week I've been chatting a lot to a moot who is a fan of BTS but doesn't know any other K-pop. So I've been helping them discover other K-pop groups, other K-pop songs, and it's been fun. We've been going like down different avenues. So we've been doing like starting off with the cheesy pop songs, like the really surreal MVs, and then more into like the ballads, like the guitar sort of focus songs. And she's been finding stuff and sharing that with me that I've not heard before. And yeah, it's been nice, a little journey of discovery with somebody who's brand new to it. And it's been nice for me because it's given me the chance to kind of listen to things like I'm listening to it again for the first time. So yeah,
I have also been involved in this, and I can say
Yes,
it has been very, very lovely. Lots of revisiting stuff that you forgot about and introducing people to things that maybe they might not have thought about trying as well, which is quite fun.
Yeah, it's been really nice. And she's been really enjoying it because she said that she is always open to listening to other K-pop, but because it's such a vast genre or industry, whatever you want to label it, it's hard to know where to start. So for her to have two people that have listened to it for years and have similar tastes, we've kind of helped her out a bit.
I like those bits of fandom interactions that are like, you know how sometimes you're in fandom and you're just kind of on your own, obsessively sort of going into a rabbit hole of something, which is definitely how I was with BTS. It's sometimes much nicer to be doing that with other people and like sending stuff back and forth. That's how I got into other K-pop, actually, was like people that I knew sending me recommendations, and then that gave me the inspiration to branch out.
Okay, so Mimi, how about you?
All right, so what I've been doing recently is it's quite literally the subject of our episode 2. I've been reinserting myself into a dead fandom that I was actually a part of back in its heyday, and then I subsequently left. Like literally it was at its peak, right? And then I sort of left because I could see where it was going. And now I've after I think years, it's been a couple of years now since the fandom has dead. So I thought I'd go back and I'd rewatch it and I'd see what exactly it was, where it went wrong. And funnily enough, as I was rewatching it, I stopped at the exact same part that I stopped when I left the fandom. Just in case anybody is interested to know, it's not a K-pop fandom. It's an animation fandom, and the show was called Voltron Legendary Defender. And I'm talking about the remake on a streaming website that sounds a lot like Betflix.
What could that be? Betflix.
Betflix and chill, you know how it is. Do any of you actually know what Voltron Legendary Defender is?
I don't know.
No.
Voltron is basically, it's an animated show. It's based off of these old cartoons that were popular back in like the 80s, right? And that pretty much should tell you exactly what kind of show it is. But those shows back in the 80s were inspired by Japanese shows, you know, like the mecha suits, so like Gundam, but it was essentially the Western version. It's a big transformer in space. That's the only way I can describe it. But it's one massive person, it's a robot in space that fights the Golra Empire. And that massive robot, by the way, the Golra Empire they're the bad guys. They're trying to take over the universe and subjugate everybody. So basically they're capitalism. And Voltron fights the Golra Empire. And the Voltron mecha suit is made up of 5 space cats. That's the only way I can describe it. And they're not actual cats, they're robot cats. They're all different colors. They're the primary colors. And so they form together to form this dude, and he basically is the Voltron transformer in space. And he fights the Golra Empire.
So in summary, Voltron is about a giant space robot controlled by cats that is fighting capitalism.
Basically.
Cool.
That sounds great.
Cool.
But yeah, so then this was the remake of the 80s. The 80s version wasn't that great. It wasn't very cohesive. It was very much like an episode. You know how cartoons in the 80s were. But then this was a Betflix reboot. So you would have thought it would have had more plot. That's really what I'm going to say. The seasons 1, 2, and 3, in my opinion, were the best seasons. And then anything after that, it wasn't that great. And so that's when I left the fandom. And also because I could just tell it was going to go downhill very quickly. There was a lot of queer baiting, which I didn't like. And then later on, now that I've rewatched the whole thing, they did have a queer character, but then it very much fell into the trope of kill your gays, and I didn't like that. So I was like, oh, I'm glad I left the fandom when I did. So yeah, that's Voltron. I'm gonna be cancelled. I can see somebody on Tumblr saying, how dare you. There was a lot of shipping wars as well in this fandom, which
oh dear.
Just to clarify, are people shipping the cats or are they shipping the robots?
No, okay.
I know nothing about Voltron.
Made it a bit clearer. I'm so sorry. The cats are robots. They're robot cats.
Right.
And they all come together to form one giant robot.
Are they shipping the small cat robots or the large man robot who is being controlled by cats?
The cat robots, they're controlled by humans. They're piloted by humans. So the cat
Does this have anything to do with furries?
No.
Oh, thank God. At least there's no furries.
But there was a subset of the fandom that did get a bit furry-ish.
There always is in a fandom that involves characters that are even slightly animal adjacent.
Oh yeah, the Golra Empire, they look like cats. I should have said that. So
there's good cats controlled by humans, good cat robots controlled by humans, controlling a big robot guy. Bad cats, not sure if robots, but represent capitalism.
Catapultism.
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 And there's a lot of queer baiting, which somehow doesn't surprise me.
A lot of queer baiting and there was a lot of ship fighting as well, which again, not surprised by. But
sorry, what? Just to clarify again, are we shipping the humans who control the cats themselves? Or the giant robot guy?
The humans, but some people also ship the humans with the Golra, who are like cat people. So
I see now where the furries come in. Yes.
Oh, okay.
But mostly the ships were the humans. Okay.
Okay, right.
But anyway, yeah, so the thing is, right, that fandom, they had a lot of issues, and quite famously on Tumblr, they were very much known for allegedly bullying the voice actors of that show. Again, this is all alleged. Please don't sue me. Also, if I accidentally revived the Voltron fandom, please don't come for me. I don't want to revive a dead fandom and then the first thing they do is cancel me. So I'm sorry.
I'm looking at the Voltron Legendary Defender Wikipedia as we speak, and there is a small section on fan behavior, and there is a quote from one of the voice actors. Apparently, he played Hunk.
Yes, yeah. I love Hunk.
Yeah, he said, in defense of the executive producers, what is not real and what will all fall by the wayside in due time is all the unwarranted hate and vitriol that the dark side of this fandom has let seep into this precious world. That is all just noise, and I refuse to listen. Which, really, that is quite a powerful quote.
Yeah, so there was a very massive divide in that fandom. There was a lot of vitriol, which there often is in these kind of fandoms, and they were very much the loud minority, but the stuff they did seeped into the main part of the fandom, and so that's why it became quite toxic, and this is also why I left at that point, and also just because I could tell, yeah, I'm not gonna like where the show is going. So that's why I left the fandom. And then obviously the last season aired, and then everybody in the fandom was like, what is this nonsense? And then the fandom quite swiftly met its end. And then I decided this year to have a little revisit.
Did the fandom kind of kill itself, or was it the show being bad that ended?
You know what, right? This is one of those ones where it was a bit of both. So if we compare it to like another fandom that I was in, that was like the Sherlock fandom, right? I was in the fandom, and then when the fandom became toxic, very much the way the VLD fandom did, I left the fandom, but I continued to watch the show. Whereas with Voltron, I left the fandom, and then because I didn't like the way the show was going, I left watching the show as well.
I was very much different with Sherlock in that I was very deep in the Sherlock fandom, and I've seen some stuff, and I actually stopped watching it because it was so bad. The fandom was a trash fire, and the creators were also a trash fire. And the show itself, particularly season 3 onwards, was also just awful. And I actually think there's parts of season 4 that I haven't watched because it was so bad. And like, that's one of those cases where I don't know if the fandom is to blame. I believe, this is my personal opinion, that the way the writers and creators of that show behaved towards fans was really disgusting and horrible. Like, there's a particular scene in, I believe it's the first episode of season 3 of Sherlock, which is picking up the show after, I think it was like a 2-year break. They left the final episode on a cliffhanger suggesting that Sherlock had survived the fall. And over the next 2 years, the fandom went absolutely bananas over all of their theories about how he could have done it, how it was possible. Every single episode was deconstructed for clues about how he may have done it.
The writers spurred that on.
The writers spurred that on.
Said it.
Yeah.
They said it in their tweets. They're like, oh yeah, the hints are all in that episode. They were saying you could figure it out, etc., etc.
And what was happening in the fandom was that it had got so big after season 1, and because it was being filmed in London, which is a really easily accessible place, hundreds of fans were turning up to filming locations. I also know people who went so far as to be stalking the cast members, which is messed up, like zero boundaries, lots of really awful behavior. But because people had been at the filming sites, and because the writers of the show knew that people were coming to the filming sites and fans were taking pictures and sharing them online, they deliberately filmed scenes or set up cameras to look like they were filming scenes that didn't end up in the final episode to like spur on all of those theories. Basically, season 3 then drops and everyone's like, oh, finally, we're going to reveal the secret. And then not only did they not do that, in a move of really crappy writing, they just didn't even bother to explain it as like a final FU to the fans. They also inserted a deeply offensive little clip of some, in inverted commas, crazy fans theorizing about what could possibly have happened after Sherlock falls off a building, which was directly stereotyping and mocking the fandom that had essentially supported the show the whole time.
Yeah.
And then after that, we just like torpedoed into a giant mess of John Locke truthers. And it was around that time that we're not going to speak of that because that's too triggering for Mimi and for me and for many other listeners, I'm sure.
Yes.
But suffice to say, it was a mess, and the creators killed not only their own show, but their own fandom very effectively.
I think Sherlock is a good example of a dead fandom that completely, as you say, killed itself. And I think that was its intention, because I think the writers of Sherlock are mostly, this is obviously a personal opinion, quite smarmy middle-class white men who did not want anything to do with the beast that they had created in the end.
But then the worst part is, right, one of the writers then went on to write for Doctor Who, and I was like,
and he killed that too.
I was like, how? If you hate that one fandom that is, obsessed with the show, and then you're moving to Doctor Who, which has years, like it's got a massive fan base.
If it's okay for me to switch to a different fandom briefly, an example of a dead fandom that is almost the complete opposite of Sherlock in the way that the fandom acts and in the way that the creators act is Hannibal. I won't go too deep into it because it is a show just littered with trigger warnings, and the fandom is the same. Brian Fuller is very engaged with fandom in positive ways. He is very supportive of fan works, fan art, fan creation. He's very supportive of, I suppose, the queer agenda. Like, if people are talking about shipping of the characters, he's all for it. He's very happy with it. He's not offended by it. He doesn't shut it down. He's very like, yeah, great, you know, you guys are creating all these wonderful things. Yeah, I'd love to do another season at some point where we make all these dreams of yours come true.
I just want to say I did ship Hannibal and Will though. Like,
same.
I was in the fandom. I shipped them so hard. I know I shouldn't have, and that's a whole trigger warning in and of itself if you have seen Hannibal. But they had a lot of chemistry. That's all I'm gonna say. Right, moving on.
Jess, what are your experiences of dead fandoms?
I was heavily involved in a fandom that was dead, but me and some others managed to revive, at least in the UK anyway, because it was something that was more famous elsewhere in like Australia and partly in America, but more as a cult kind of thing, but hardly any presence in the UK. So me and some people of a similar age, like quite young, started liking this old TV show and decided to build an online community for it. So like we made a website, we made forum, Facebook pages, you know, there was absolutely no like online presence, no online community, apart from this like one weird Australian-based website. So that was nice, yeah, because I think unlike the Sherlock fandom, or rather the Sherlock creators who seemed quite intent on killing their own fandom because they were sick of it and they wanted to move on to another job, we actually got to know the content creators of the show that we were fans of, and we actually kind of were encouraged by them, and they were in some ways involved with it as well. So that was nice. It showed to me at least that they like the thing that they'd created wasn't just a job for them that they'd done like 30, 40 years ago or whatever. It was something that they loved and was very dear to them, and they wanted people to still enjoy it, which seems the complete opposite of what you've just described as the Sherlock fandom, where they wanted to basically burn it and run away and move on to something else.
I think yours and Hannibal are both good examples of people appreciating that fandom has a power and can be extremely useful, whereas something like Sherlock and, from what Mimi says, Voltron, sounds like maybe they don't appreciate how powerful a fandom can be and how, I guess, kind of lightly you have to tread with fandoms, because they can either really help you or they can really hinder you. Like, I mean, it's going back a long time, but like the original Roswell High series in the early 2000s, that completely, it got cancelled. But then the fandom said, no, we want more of this. They started sending them bottles of Tabasco sauce because that's what the aliens used to put on their food. And there was such a big like fandom backing and wanting more that they picked it up again. The last 2 seasons were absolute pop, but they still picked it up again and made more episodes. So fandom sometimes can revive these things, and it could be your saving grace, or it could be what kills you. It depends on, I guess, things like your showrunners and your writers and how they understand and interact with fandom, which I think is quite interesting. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I think it shows that fandom love isn't unconditional, whereas I think a lot of creators take that for granted. They really do think that once they've got a fan base, that is it, that they'll be with them for life. And they rely a little bit too much on that goodwill.
I also find it interesting this is going to talk about a fandom that I was in, where not all pieces of media are designed with fans in mind. Like if you talk about shows, TV shows are now almost all exclusively designed to appeal to different demographics of fans. People who will regularly watch it, people who will talk about it on social media. So that's like everything from, you know, I know someone who's a really big fan of Succession, which is suddenly really big on Twitter at the moment with a lot of the like non-fandom people I know. But then there's also like the fandom people like us who are, you know, we watch a lot of like sci-fi or fantasy or like whatever. But like a film that has a completely dead fandom, because I don't think it was ever designed to have a fandom, is Inception.
Yes.
First of all, it's a brilliant movie.
It is.
Someone
Absolutely
here
love
has not seen it, right? It's you.
We're all
it,
staring at that person.
It's you, isn't it, Jen? You've not seen Inception.
Listen, it's one of those things where it's always been on my list of, I should watch that. And then I've just never got round to it.
It's brilliant. I think I watched it 4 or 5 times in the cinema. Like I took every single member of my family individually to go and see it so I could see it again in like, when was it released? Like 2010? I think.
It was ages ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But being a Christopher Nolan project, he's like a serious movie director, and it was his passion project. And then I think the next film he went on to make was Interstellar, which is like very highbrow, very like, oh, I'm proper movie director.
I'm a nerd. I know Christopher Nolan for Batman.
Yeah, exactly. So he did Batman to get the money to make Inception. First of all, Inception was one of my first fandoms. It's like one of the first fandoms that I engaged with on like LiveJournal. I actually have some LiveJournal pages of people I used to follow in the Inception fandom that are still active. Inception is obviously a standalone movie. There was never any possibility that it would have a sequel or a prequel. These days, if they'd released it and it did as well as it did then, they'd probably bang out a sequel, because that's how Hollywood works now. But the fact that it's this brilliant standalone movie, and I believe there's a prequel comic strip if you're very deep in the fandom like I was, but it's still, the fandom is still ticking over. Me and the 5 remaining people in the Inception fandom salute you.
Is it going to be like the spinning top that goes on forever?
Yes.
Yeah. See, Jen, you would get that reference if you'd watched the movie.
Yeah, you should watch Inception, Jen.
I will get round to it, okay?
It's a really good example of a film where people created a lot of stuff for it and then acknowledged there's not going to be any more of this. We're just going to work with what we've got. And the fandom just carried on ticking over. It did have, by 2010 standards, it had a very tiny crumb of queer representation. And when I say tiny crumb, I mean like Arthur and Ian flirted and
literally.
It was 1,000 ships.
No, the funniest thing was I remember watching it in the cinemas, and the minute I saw that Arthur and Eames scene, I was just like, no, this is gonna launch 1,000 ships. I already know it. And then literally I went home and I searched on, I think it was fanfiction.net at that point, but literally there were already so many fanfictions on there already, and I was like, yeah, see, we had to work with crumbs back then.
I haven't even seen that film, and I saw the shipping on Tumblr.
It's still there. And
they had like 2 minutes screen time together, but you know what? They made it work.
They did. I
mean, it also doesn't help that it was Tom Hardy who absolutely encourages homosexual behaviour every chance that he gets.
On that mark, it's now a time for us to have a word from our sponsor of this episode.
Hello, I'm Bea, and I'm going to be speaking about our sponsor for this episode. Episode 2 of Oomf Said is sponsored by the iconic interview given by Tom Hardy during the press cycle for the second Venom movie, in which the headline reads, "Of course I've had sex with men. I'm an actor for F's sake," except he didn't say F. And I would like to say that over the past 2 weeks since this interview was released, in which he talks about many other things as well as the fact that he's had sex with men, this particular headline and screenshots of it in various forms have popped up on my Twitter, my Tumblr, and at one very memorable point, my Facebook page, multiple times with increasingly unhinged tags. And my absolute favourite one came from a friend who I have known for 12 years since we were in the Inception fandom together, in which she simply tagged it, "We all know you've had sex with men, Tom. You've been posting your nudes on the internet since 2010.
I feel like if Ask Yahoo was still alive this day, the top search would be, "Does Tom Hardy is gay?"
100%.
I'm not going to speculate on his sexuality. That's, his personal business. He's obviously given us some information about it there. And indeed, he gave us a lot of grainy, grinder quality photos over the years as well. So that's been our sponsor for today, which really lives in my mind rent-free.
Moving on.
Another example of a positive fandom revival that was nice and had no issues, Pushing Daisies. I don't know if any of you remember watching that show.
It was
just cute and very gentle, and Lee Pace was a darling.
He was. Wasn't that also Brian Fuller? Wasn't that him as well?
That was Brian Fuller too.
Yes. Yeah. No, B, you absolutely need to watch Pushing Daisies, because the tonal shift from Pushing Daisies and then his other work, Hannibal. It makes no sense, literally.
Pushing Daisies was essentially about this lovely, shy, introverted man who accidentally gets the power to revive people when he touches them. But he only can revive them until he touches them again. If he touches you and you come back to life, and then he touches you again, you're dead. And you're dead. He can't bring you to life again. And he accidentally brings his childhood love to life. So the whole series is him and her, their kind of love story and how they can't touch because he'll kill her again, which doesn't sound cute, but it is. And it got cancelled after one season. But the fandom was like, no, absolutely not. No, we want more. And I think it did like 3 seasons in the end, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And it was just delightful from start to finish. And once again, Brian Fuller knows and understands how to work fandoms, I think.
Yes.
I think this
absolutely.
is going to be the overall message from this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a positive take.
I'm interested in how we engage with fan work, how we engage with fandoms. Sometimes you can feel almost like you've missed the boat with a fandom. Like I felt a little bit like this with the Untamed, which is not a dead fandom, but people would say the fandom is probably on its way out. The show aired in, I believe it was 2020, during the pandemic, basically, in 2020, when it suddenly became very, very, very popular with people who hadn't even watched a C-drama before. And then it ended, and as dramas do, even though it has like 50 episodes or something, and there's no possibility of a sequel or anything like that. It's done. The creators aren't going to do anything like that again. There was a great deal of fandom issues, which eventually allegedly led to several fan fiction sites, which I will not name for their protection, being actively banned in China. It was very messy, and the actors themselves were quite personally affected by it. And so the fandom is kind of on its way out. Like people are still writing for it, but a lot of people have moved on to other C-dramas, or they've moved back to the fandom they were in before, or whatever. And so and I started watching it pretty much when it came onto Betflix, and I was just, watching it week by week, and it had already finished at that point. So there were people creating for it, and I was like, oh, have I kind of missed the big wave of this fandom, and now I'm going to be sort of trying to catch up on it. And so it's like, great, I have all these episodes to watch and then all this fic to read, but there isn't going to be anything after I finish it.
I mean, I think you could actually, it's quite interesting, I think, that Asian dramas kind of are the ultimate creators of dead fandoms, because
that's exactly what I was going to say.
C dramas and K dramas, they have one season, then it's done. There's nothing else. So you can be a fan of that thing, but your content is that season, and then it's done. And people don't really write fanfic for like K-dramas and stuff. There's some, like if you look, there is some, but it's not common.
So there are specific fandoms that I joined that I know I'm probably going to be here for a while, and there are specific fandoms that I joined that I know it's just for this period. So like when I was watching The Untamed, I knew pretty much that it was going to be, I was going to ride the wave as it came out. There was going to be a lot of fan fiction afterwards. There was going to be a bit of hype. There would still be, things here and there, but then after a while I knew that there was going to be an expiration date on the fandom, right? Because I was there when it was released. I watched it as it was released, unlike B, who came in after it had already been released, and then it was also on Netflix. By the way, if anybody's listening to this and they're going to watch The Untamed after this, watch the one on YouTube. Don't watch the Netflix on the YouTube. Translations are much better. But anyway, so I think with fandoms, there are specific types of fandoms, I think, right? And it's with dead fandoms, it's interesting to know about fandoms that should have lived longer than they did and died a swift death. And then there are fandoms that you enter knowing they've got an expiration date. And then I think there are fandoms that you go in, you didn't realize that it was actually going to turn into a fandom, and then sort of petered out naturally. And I think the comparison for all of these three is like, for me at the very least. So Voltron is one of those fandoms that I went in that died a swift death, killed both by its fans and the content creators. Then it was the Untamed, which I went into knowing that there was going to be an expiration date on this fandom. And then it was the last one, which was Inception, where I went in not realizing that I was going to come out having joined the fandom. And I think those are different types of dead fandoms. But anyway, I did want to hear Jess's opinion about dead fandoms, considering she revived one.
Yeah, I think from what you guys have said, it's kind of, I don't want to generalize it, but it is almost kind of an Eastern and Western kind of approach to media and fandom, therefore, as a result of that, where in the East, as I say, I'm generalizing a lot, so like you've mentioned with C-dramas, K-dramas, a lot of things are made for a limited time. There's no dwelling on it, there's no spinning it out for as long as possible to get as much money out of it as possible. So once something is done, it's done, and therefore the fandoms kind of know that, and they go in with that expectation that it will go as quickly as it came. Whereas in the West, we just kind of cotton onto something, and once it's a success, the showrunners, the creators, whoever, will just run and run and run with it endlessly, which will obviously therefore keep the fandom going on and on and on, because they'll always have content to consume. So it's interesting to see the differences there with the fandoms in, like, as I say, with standing something that's made in China, Korea, whatever, that doesn't have a long shelf life, and something in the West where they create something, people love it, and therefore they think, oh, how can I make this last for as long as possible, until either the fans get sick of it or I as a creator get sick of it.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so.
This is very valuable pieces of Jess wisdom. Yeah, that's a really great point. I love that. Just the idea of like different approaches towards fandom and content creation.
I think the only anomalies really have been things like Inception, which was intended to be a one-off film, and the credit to Christopher Nolan for not actually going ahead and making more and more of it, like The Matrix, which has just gone on forever and ever and ever because people just loved it and they still love it, and there's a new film out now.
I like that some these fan connections, they don't necessarily involve speaking to each other. Like, you will speak to other fans. Like earlier in the episode, we were talking about, you know, Jess and Jen saying that they've been introducing a friend to new K-pop groups, and like that's an active way of doing it. But there's also the fact that you can just be passively or casually following someone on their fanfiction platform or on Twitter or on Tumblr, and kind of, without even speaking to them necessarily, just pick up vibes of like, oh, you're definitely into the same things I'm into.
Oh, big time.
If you post about this thing that I'm interested in, and then you start posting about something else that I've never heard of, I'm far more likely, even if you don't DM me saying you need to watch this show, I will probably check out that show because I implicitly trust you, even though I've never spoken to you.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, V, literally.
Like, and that's also a way of like how dead fandoms operate, because people are, I'm not talking to any of the people that I was in some dead fandoms with. I literally never speak to the people I was in the Sherlock fandom with, but we are all still moots, and if they're into something, I'm a lot more likely to check it out because, you know, we've all been through similar fan experiences, we have similar tastes, so I'm far more likely to check stuff out. So it's this kind of quiet network of people who are interested in things. So it's like a nice, I suppose the dead fandoms are the quiet side of the fandom coin, whereas the stuff we talked about last week was a lot more like the yelling and the being excited and the screaming on the timeline side of fandom things. Dead fandoms much more like, yes, I will quietly stalk this person's entire Tumblr blog until I find some fan fiction for this new show that I'm interested in, which got cancelled 9 years ago, which I'm still going to watch the whole thing and read every single piece of fanfic about it on the internet in one weekend.
You know what? I like that we're ending this on a positive note. You know, like obviously when I started in when we started in on this episode, we did pretty much start off with fandoms where we didn't have good experiences that either we swiftly exited or that imploded on themselves. But sometimes I think it's nice to find the aftermath, if you will, of a fandom and, you know, go in on it when it's quiet. Like, you've missed the drama, so now you just get to enjoy the good parts that were there.
At the start of the Panini, I kind of dived more into K-pop, which I'd kind of had a background vague interest in for a long time, but I had never really bothered to like fully get into. And also I started watching K-dramas more seriously. And as we said earlier, K-dramas are Asian dramas in general, but I'm specifically talking about K-dramas, kind of the ultimate examples of dead fandom creators. But it's actually really nice because everyone gets excited for like the one season of this thing, and then it's over and people talk about it for a while, and every now and then people reminisce about it or suggest it to other people, like, oh, I watched this one and I think you'll really like this one, or no, don't touch that was terrible. And it's nice, like, it's a different way of doing fandom because it's not necessarily all consuming like some fandoms can be, but it's just gentle and nice. And especially when there's like a big one coming out on Netflix that people are excited about, it's really interesting. Like, even when that drama goes bad, it's still nice because everyone hates it together, so it's like a bonding experience with a bunch of people that you don't know.
Yeah, it's like a no strings attached kind of fandom, I guess.
Yeah,
a one night stand fandom.
Tinder fandom.
Ew! Swipe right for if you like this fandom, swipe left if it's an absolute trash fire.
Only fandoms. Carry on.
Mimi, stop.
Gross.
I was about to say something mildly intelligent about K-pop as a fandom and like temporary K-pop groups and how that can give a bit of a transient nature to fandom as well, I guess. And I think that might be a topic for another episode.
Also, there's a certain moot that we all share who posted quite an apt tweet today. She might listen to this, so it's a good tweet, and it is absolutely what we're talking about. How you can sometimes leap from one dead or dying fandom to another more alive fandom, and it's like a pipeline. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that too.
The tweet says that you're either part of the One Direction to BTS pipeline or the 2000s emo bands to BTS pipeline. And if you are both, you are the most powerful of all. And I think that is a perfect kind of summation of fandom in general, to be honest. You tend to leapfrog.
Also, if that moot is listening, we love you.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, if that moot's listening, we love you very much. And we think you're great. And please come on the podcast as a guest at some point.
Yes, please do. Well, I mean, I guess the positive note we could end on is that Jess has revived successfully a dead fandom, which means she is our messiah now.
All hail Jess.
Yes.
Yeah. Second coming of fandom.
Yes. Jess, our fandom master.
Yes. So if we now head to wrapping up the end of episode 2, and I will pass you lovely listeners along to our fabulous Jen.
So today's lesson from fandom is that most never die. You might think it's over, but there's always some person, like B with Inception, keeping those flames alive. Now I will hand over to Jess with the socials.
Yeah, okay. So if you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @Oomf Said. So please pop over there and say hi to us. And if you want to follow us, we'll be able to post all the latest news and updates there. If you also want to share any of your favourite Oomf Said tweets, we will anonymise them and use them in the podcasts. Or you can make suggestions to us, comments, feedback. We're always happy to hear from you. And now I will hand you to B, who will give you a clue of what we'll be discussing next time.
Yeah, so next week's episode is on a topic that we have touched on in this podcast and in previous ones. And if you know us in fandom, you'll probably know us from this fandom. It is K-pop. We will be speaking about topics around K-pop. you will have to tune in next week to find out what we're actually talking about, because there's a lot to cover there. It's a massive fandom. Don't even know where to start. And I'm going to hand over to Mimi, the lovely Mimi. Thank you for hosting.
I don't know if I did much hosting this week. I'll be honest, I just let you guys go a bit wild.
That's a good host. I think.
Still counts.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank the listeners. Thank you for joining us this week and listening to us talk a lot of nonsense. I would just like to reiterate that a lot of the stuff that we said about fandoms or about dead fandoms or dying fandoms, they are all of us, our own opinions. And like Jess said, we do have a Twitter page. So if you have any particular feelings about what we've said, if you agree, if you disagree, please do find us on our Twitter page. Be nice though, that's important. Be nice. But do find us, let us know what you thought, you know, if you have any funny tweets or anything that you want us to see, or if you had any questions or ideas that you wanted to submit, we'd be happy to listen to those. We hope you had a fun time and thank you. See you next episode. Bye.